Okay. All right, I usually begin with summary, so summary of what happened in the last was
we are short.
Pardon?
We are short.
So the idea was how do we construct rules or laws of structure? And the very first thing is that in order to construct these rules, we need representations. So the real life objects are words and sentences and texts, but we create these imaginary things called representations. And the rules are on the representations, not on real life entities. Representations are theoretical constructs. So in the representations that we looked at in the last class, there are things like noun, verb, noun phrase, etc., which are not part of reality, they are part of the imaginary things that linguists create. And then we create constraints, laws, rules, whatever you call it, doesn't matter. Principles, they all mean the same thing on representations. Okay, and this is, let me illustrate how this works once again to show two different ways of looking at these guys. One is the declarative way of looking at it, and the other is a procedural way of looking at it. So suppose I have the following set of rule 1. S goes to NP BP, and NP precedes BP. Incidentally, I should say that the way in which I'm writing this is not the way you will see in textbooks. I'm changing the textbook notation. In a textbook, you will see this. You will not see a comma. I'm separating two kinds of information. This one says S, the symbol S goes to NP and BP, and NP precedes BP. So the two things are integrally combined. I'm separating the two relations, the precedence relation and the pathway relation. And there's a reason for doing that. It will become clear later. So I want to write it like this. And S means sentence, NP means noun phrase, and BP means verb phrase. It doesn't really matter what the letters are. You can call them alpha and beta. You'll get exactly the same results. Because I'm not defining these NPs and VPs in any other terms, except in terms of these rules themselves. And that's important to know. And NP goes to determiner and noun, and determiner precedes noun. But there is an alternative. This is one piece, namely NP and PP, prepositional phrase, and NP precedes PP. So you could take either this one or this one. There's an option. And you should also say that this determiner is optional. But if it exists, it should precede noun. This applies to English, but not to some other language. Let's say like French or Malay. Now the advantage of separating these two is that I could take this rule, common to English and French or Malay, but this I can exchange. I can say that it's the other way around. Sorry, this is not Malay, this one is. The determiner before the noun or after the noun. So this also, there are some languages in which this NP is after. Now we have to expand this. BP goes to the verb, okay, and then optionally a noun phrase, another noun phrase optionally, okay, and then you can say an optionally, so let me put it this way, it can be a noun phrase or it can be a prepositional phrase. This, I think this much is enough. There is more stuff, but I'm just using this much to create a reasonable structure. Okay. So, given these rules, The question is, how do you get the sentences? In addition to this rules, you also have a lexicon, which says that, you know, things like boy is a noun, the is a determiner, this is a determiner, likes is a verb, and so on. So you will have a list of those things from which you can put these things into the appropriate slots. Okay, how does this system work? Well, in the early 50s, actually late 50s.
Mohanan, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
So these laws, or the structure over here is for grammatical correctness.
Yes, absolutely.
But it need not be unambiguous in message.
No. No. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. In fact, this gives you very limited, even grammatically, it gives you only limited power. There are many things it cannot explain.
Okay.
So let me take you through the derivation, and then you'll see the problems. Not the problems, but you'll see that there are many other things that we need to do. But the earliest grammars were of this type. That the crucial aspect of this is that this is in terms of categories. So things like noun and verb are lexical categories, meaning word categories, categories of words. And these guys, things like NP and VP, are categories not of words but word groups. Okay, so people call them lexical, meaning word, and phrasal categories.
Are there rules for these phrases? What constitutes a noun phrase? Are there rules for that also?
Yeah, this is a rule which says a noun phrase consists of a determiner and a noun, or a noun phrase can consist of a noun phrase and a prepositional phrase.
Okay.
Let me also add.
No, because
PP goes to preposition and noun phrase. Yeah, this pairing is 2 and 4 together is interesting. Yeah, so many
I'm
more
asking
rules
in
of
the
that.
case, see, trivially over here, you can go to the lexicon, pick up words, and if you stitch, 2 of them together, then you get a noun phrase or something.
That's
But what happens if you have, a somewhat more compounded phrase?
I'm not sure what the question is, but let me give you a derivation, then you can ask the question
Okay.
again later. So let me show you how this works. Initially,
fourth one, is there a precedence rule also?
yeah, there is. I'm not going to write it anymore. I'm lazy. Yeah.
How are you distinguishing lexical and phrasal categories?
Lexical is simply a word category, what the traditional grammarians call parts of speech. Noun, verb, adjective, article, adverb, that kind of stuff. But when you put 2 or 3 lexical categories of that kind together, so like the boy, what's the category of this phrase, the boy? Or on the mat is a prepositional phrase. There are 3 words there. So phrasal categories are sequences of words. It's not exactly accurate, but doesn't matter. So the initial case was, if you're thinking about an algorithm, this as an algorithm, okay, the initial symbol is always S. Okay, you begin with that one, go to S. And then you look around, and then you say, where does it say S? Okay, here. So whenever you see S, the next step will be NP and VP. Okay, so step number 2, NP and VP. So S is rewritten as NP-VP. So this was called rewrite rules, because this symbol was rewritten as that symbol, that sequence. Now you look around and say, okay, where do you find NP? NP, okay, I can rewrite NP as determiner and noun. So I rewrite this as the string determiner, noun, and VP. And you have to say this applies rule 1 and this applies rule 2. But you still have to expand this one VP, so you look and say, aha, here. I can rewrite this as V. Of course, that is sufficient, but I decide to write this also and this. So I'm going to write determiner, noun, verb, NP, and PP. This is by rule 3. Okay, now I have to do this all over again. I can decide to write just noun. Okay, determiner, noun, verb, just noun, and PP by rule 2. I still have to expand this one. How do I do that? I look at the word. Okay, here's a PP, preposition and noun phrase. So I write determiner, noun, verb, noun, P, and NP. I might decide just to write this rule. Sorry, where is it? This one. And I could do that. Determiner, noun. And then no further expansion is possible because there is no rule which says you expand determiner, noun, etc. You have reached the terminal terminal symbols. So this is the string that you get. Now what you do is you go to the lexicon and pick words that match this. Determiner, okay, here is the noun, okay, there's a boy. And verb, okay, you can say et. And noun, so let's say apples. Preposition, in, det, the, garden. So you get the sentence, the boy ate apples in the garden. That's how the thing works. Right? It's a dumb, when you look back, it's a dumb thing, but notice that this was in the 50s when this was inconceivable for people who are studying language. So this is what you have is a production procedure. An algorithm to begin with S and get this one. This is a derivation. And the derivation was kind of seen as like a logical derivation or a mathematical derivation, where one symbol is replaced by another symbol. So okay, that's what you do in algebra. You get a symbol, and if you say x is equal to y squared plus z squared, wherever you find x, you can replace it with y squared and z squared. That's the basic idea here. That's why they're called rewrite rules. Now, even though I did this as kind of rewrite rules this way, there is implicit here is the notion of structure, okay? Because you could do this. Right? So if you can keep track of this, the lines, then there is structure. But that part, exactly how it is represented, etc., was, I think there was some degree of hand waving, but it is possible to put that in. You can put some kind of index and get this, make sure that you know the structure. The basic idea was that this gives you the application of the rewrite rules this way, will give you this structure. Of course, all this is redundant, so you'll just collapse it into a single det. Okay. Now this will also give you, notice things like if you have a VP and you expand that into V and NP, you can rewrite this as NP and PP. But if you have VP, you can rewrite it as P and NP. But this NP can be written as prepositional, NP and PP. And again, you can do this, right? So this is a recursive combination of recursion, meaning you can repeat endlessly. You don't have to stop, but of course at some point you will say, okay, I'm going to not use the PP part, I'll just use this part, and it stops. And there are many such recursive rules. What that means is that you can use this rule system to create, in principle, a sentence that is infinitely long. You don't have to stop. There is no upper bound to the length of a sentence, even though, of course, you will not be able to speak such a sentence because you have to breathe, or you have to, at some point before you die, you'll have to stop. That's all. Okay, now you can ask your question. This is what the set of rewrite rules will give
Actually,
you.
I was trying to imply this, that if
Okay.
you had
Recursion.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, I mean not necessarily recursion, but you had abnormally long sentences
Yeah.
where there was a complex interplay between these
Yeah.
things. Right?
There are many other recursive rules.
Right.
So, for example, you could write a rule like S goes to S, the chain star symbol, and S. Sorry, you should be in English. It should be and S. So this means you can put any number of S's and S. So this will give you sentences like John went out. John opened the door, went out, walked through the garden, and so on, and had a cup of coffee. So you can put any number of sentences here, 0 or any number.
So there is no limit as such to the length of a sentence.
No. That's what these recursive rules do. And that's okay. I mean, how can you put an upper limit?
Sure.
Because if you say 6 sentences, somebody will come up with 7th one, right? So you have to allow for that possibility. So take a sentence like, I went to the market and bought oranges, bananas, apples, chairs, humans, slaves. You can keep going, right? When do you need to stop? No, you don't need to. And that's the recursive rule of this type. NP goes to the same kind of stuff. NP star and NP. That's also a recursive. This is a single recursive rule. This is also a single recursive rule. Whereas the other one that I mentioned, this, what gives you this is a combination of NP and PP that gives you the recursion. Now, okay, this is, so in this mechanism, there are two kinds of things. There are these rules, and there is this, what is called lexical insertion. This part is a lexical insertion. This part is the derivation of the structure itself. Once the structure is completed, you put in the words. So two different operations. Now, what was brilliant at that time, of course now it is all changed, but at that time this was a brilliant move, was that after this you were also able to relate the boy pinched the girl and the girl was pinched by the boy. To avoid complaints about being sexist, I'm going to change this to the girl pinched the boy and the boy was pinched by the girl. This is not sexist, the earlier sentence was sexist. How do you connect these two sentences? Well, you get to this kind of level, and there is another kind of rule that applies to the structure itself. That's called a transformational rule. This one generates a structure, the rewrite rules, or also called phrase structure rules. These are the phrase structure rules. Transformational rule will take a structure of this kind and change the structure. You had a kind of implicit question. So let me write a rule like this. If you have NP1, some kind of auxiliary, I'm not going to explain that, and a verb, and then an NP2, what you do is you exchange these two, NP2, okay, and then you write auxiliary, whatever that is, and you write the passive, insert the passive thingy and verb and NP2, NP1. Oh, sorry, not NP1. You say by NP1. How does it work? This one, the girl is NP1, pinched is verb, and there is the auxiliary here is this past tense. I'm not going to exactly work out the details. In that system, the auxiliary was sitting here and it got moved. I will not work out the technical details. And this is NP2. So it fits this description. Sorry. Yeah. Right? The structural description is met by this thingy. So you change this, and the notation for that is double arrow. The notation here is the single arrow. And then what you do is exchange them. So you get NP2, you say the boy, which is NP2, auxiliary, the past tense, and passive is B and EN. And the effect of this is was pinched. I won't work out the details inside this, but that's what you get. By NP1 is the girl. So the relation between the active and passive was expressed by a transformational rule. So these are structure building rules, and these guys are structure changing rules. This was the basic idea. You don't need a separate structure building for the passive. All that you need is to alter this thing a little bit. This gives you enormous advantages. I'll explain those advantages a little later. Why were they called transformations? Well, if you look at the idea of linear transformations like translation and rotation, reflection, scaling, and so on. What happens in these things is that certain things are kept constant and certain other things are changed. So in translation, when you have a triangle like this and you move it from here to here, what is kept constant is the size of the triangle and the shape of the triangle. But the location is changed. Change of location without affecting anything else. In rotation, if you have a rectangle like this and then you rotate it like this with the center, the location is kept constant. That's the location expressed by this dot here. And you change the orientation, everything else is kept the same. In scaling, what you do is you take a triangle and you expand. So what happens is you just change the size, but the shape is kept the same. So basic idea of transformation is that transformation goes with symmetry. Symmetry is those traits which are kept constant, and translation is that which is changed. So you can say something like change and changelessness are put together in this fashion. That's what Chomsky was doing. So the basic idea here is that in this case, girl is the pincher and the boy is the victim. By moving these two, that relation is kept. This is the victim and this is the agent or the pincher. So what is it that these two sentences have in common? What is it that is constant? That in this, the meaning that the girl is the pincher, the girl performed an action, and that affected the boy, that is retained here. The meaning is not changed. The meaning is that which is constant. The form is changed. So the symmetry, that which is invariant, remains, but there is a change. That was the idea of transformation. And that idea of transformation remains. If you wish to connect this to biology, it would be like homology is of this type. So when you look at human arm and cow's legs, that which is invariant is the basic design, but there are many other changes. Those are the transformations. Okay. So that was the insight. That insight of capturing what is invariant at the same time expressing what is variable. Invariance, if you want to put it that way, it is what you are trying to capture is invariance under variability. Another example would be the water molecule H2O is the invariant part of water, but when you change the temperature, one becomes solid, becomes liquid and gas. Exactly the same idea here. You are amused or you are okay. I'm just trying to connect linguistics to physics and chemistry and biology and mathematics. But the word transformation cuts across these disciplinary boundaries. Because capturing invariance and variability is a central problem in every discipline. We just call it different words. So you might say something like variations of the same tune, you call it leitmotif, you call it archetype, you call it Brahman. They're all capturing the same idea. Manifestations of the same basic core abstract thing is what we are trying to do here. Plato called it the transcendental reality. It's the same thing. Okay. Now, so the thing that I wrote here is called the passive rule. That is, you exchange the NP and VP, and you insert this passive morphology on the verb and so on, and then you attach a by preposition. That's part of the passive rule. But if you look at the same thing, passive, in Indian languages, you find that the form is so different. So in English passive, the girl pinched the boy, and the boy was pinched by the girl. If you, I'm going to use Malayalam, but you can translate it into whatever Indian language you want. Penkutti Ankutiye Muli. In Hindi, this is translated as Ladki Ladke ko, Ladki ne Ladke ko pinch kiya. Okay. What is pinch in Hindi? Or make it Mara. Okay, whatever. Pita. Okay, yeah. Okay, and if you want the passive version of this, you can actually, if you want, keep the word order the same. So you can say pen itiyal. The translates as ladki se in Hindi. On this is the accusative case. This counterpart of ko in Hindi. Instead of saying an kutiye is ladke ko, you say ladka. The accusative case disappears. And then you say mullapettu. This is the passive marker. But that is kind of inside the verb, between the verb and the past tense. So apparently it looks so different from English. The differences are, you don't have this. Instead, you have kind of suffix-like thing attached to the noun. You don't have an exchange of.
But I thought this was going to be an example where the two noun phrases were swapped.
Yeah, but notice that Malayalam, they don't have to swap it.
No, you don't have to, but
yeah.
could you?
You can. But then you can also swap these things. Given these 3 words,
Yeah.
you can have 6 orders. You can put them in any order, it doesn't matter. It's unlike English. In Indian languages, you can, this is called free word order. Free word order doesn't mean that any order is okay, but the order of subject and object and verb can be moved around. And if you have one more object, then you get 28 possible orders. Like if, for example, the boy gave a book to the girl, or the boy gave the girl a book. There are 4 pieces, you get any possible order. So in the late 70s, actually later 70s, these issues came up. There were 2 questions. One is, in Chinese, for example, it doesn't look like, the passive doesn't look like English, it looks different. It's fixed word order. But, it can be, it's differently done. And then this came, free word order languages became very important. How do you express passive in this free word order? What is it that the passive in this and these languages and the passive in these languages, what do they have in common? It's not expressible in terms of these categories. That's completely missing. But if you say something like, if you have a subject, an object, and a predicate is a verb, and the subject is the agent, and the object is the patient, and the predicate is whatever, some action. That is how it happens here. What does the passive rule do? Passive rule converts this into subject. So the subject here is Pengutti, the girl. The subject in this case is the boy. So that is what is happening here. And the subject, original subject, is changed into some other thing. Let me call it adjunct. Adjunct because it is optional. You don't have to express it. So like, you don't need to express this by the girl. It's an adjunct. Now notice that this rule, what I've written here, applies to both English and Malayalam, and all the other languages like Chinese and Yoruba and various other things. So a large number of us said, the universal rule is this. This is a language particular manifestation. This is not how you should express the passive rule. But notice now we are moving from category to function. It should be expressed at a deeper level of functions, not at the surface level of form. That was the basic idea. That the rules are expressed, the important rules are expressed in terms of functions rather than categories. So this is kind of like saying that the function of human eyes and human hands, etc., these are sensory motor functions of the organs. But if you look at the bacteria, those functions are manifested in a different way in terms of protein molecules attached to the surface of the membrane, cell membrane, yeah.
But with the previous case, you had a connection with the lexicon.
Yeah.
And it was a straightforward connection.
Yeah, you can.
But could you have that connection here?
Yeah. Yeah. So let me describe how that system works. So I'm going to erase all this and describe to you what happened in the 80s. Late 70s and the early 80s, where everything important happened in linguistics. Why? Reasons are obvious. That's when I was a graduate student. So all the interesting things happened at that time. After that, see, once I finished my studies, the linguistics has been downhill. See, so all the good things happened when you were graduate students. So the post-70s linguistics, syntax, I'll come to semantics a little later, looked like this. There is a functional structure in terms of functions. And I could call it category structure, but I'm going to call it form structure to make it slightly more transparent. By form structure, I mean structure in terms of nouns, verbs, etc. But these functional structure also in terms of functional categories. So this is exactly like in function in biology. Like heart has a structure, what function does it perform is a different thing. Eye has a structure, physical and anatomy. So by form I mean the counterpart of anatomy. So you could call it anatomical structure and physiological structure. What the thing does is the distinction that I'm making. And at this level, the unity across humans and bacteria are visible. At this level, the unity is obscured. That was a basic insight in the early 80s time. So, functional structure will have rules like this. A clause consists of a subject, okay, an object, the object is optional, and a predicate. Okay? So you will get this kind of structure: clause, subject, predicate, object. And this is English. In Malayalam, you will have a clause consists of subject. The typical thingy is object here and predicate here, but the other orders are also possible. So this part applies to all human languages. But there is an additional rule in English. That is, the subject precedes the object and the predicate precedes, let me say the predicate, and the predicate precedes the object. This is language particular. So there are languages in which the verb comes first or the object comes first and so on. Those have to be separately stipulated. But this is the universal part. In Malayalam, you don't specify this. Okay, so that means you can just put them in whatever order you like. So that's the first part of the stuff. Then there's the form structure. The form structure rules also underwent some serious changes. I'm not going to describe those, but let me just for now, let me put this as the same kind of stuff. This will say NP, subject goes to, sorry, S goes to NP and BP, B goes to NP and so on. But you need to connect this with this. Okay. The functional structure and the form structure have to be connected. And these are correspondence rules. The rules that connect the form and the function. So you will say, this guy is the subject and this guy is the object in English. That's a correspondence mechanism. What will you say in Malayalam? This is English correspondence rule. In Malayalam you say, subject is expressed as the nominative case. Object is expressed as the accusative case. Okay. But those are matters of correspondence. The central rule remains the same. And this is where languages can vary. To say that subject is always nominative, object is always accusative is not quite true. It's a little more complicated. In fact, it's a fairly difficult. The relation between functions like subject and object and the case marker is fairly complex in Malayalam. It's much more complex in Hindi. In fact, Tara spent a whole chapter on that, of something like 30, 40 pages to work out the rules of correspondence between the case markers the grammatical functions. But it is doable. But many of them are part universal and part idiosyncratic to human languages, particular languages. So when do you have ne, for example, is a difficult proposition. So you can say ladke ne ladke ko mara, but you say ladka ladki ko marega, right? If it's the future tense, the ne disappears. So you have to put that into your rule structure. Also, there are some meanings that change. So there is apparently a meaning difference between ladka, how do you say streak? Chilaya, is it? Ladke ne chilaya has a meaning difference. In one case, you couldn't help it, you just shouted without any control. In the other case, you intentionally shouted. The moment you add ne, there is a meaning of intentionality and volition and control that comes in. So those other complications come in, but I won't go into those details. All those are expressed in terms of these correspondence rules. So the basic idea here is that there are two dimensions of structure. And there are rules that tell you what the internal structure is for both dimensions. One for this, one for that. And you have these things that give you the correspondences. What are well-formed structures in one dimension? What are well-formed structures in another dimension? And what are the ways of connecting those things, correspondences? Notice what I have done here is not, in the earlier case, in the pre-70 stuff, I changed one structure into another structure. It was a change. A transformation was conceived of as a change of structure. Here, it is not conceived of as a change, it's conceived of as a relation between two structures. So this is where the language of procedure, the procedural conception of language structure is changed to a declarative conception. So you're not saying, this is how you produce a sentence. You're simply saying, these are the structural relations between different pieces in a sentence. And to meet this revised view, rules like this were also changed. I mean, the way you understood those rules were also changed. So initially, in the 50s, this was conceived of as a procedure. When you find the symbol S, replace it with the symbols NP and VP. That was the interpretation at that time. That was changed into simply, this is a well-formed structure. A unit S consisting of NP and VP is well-formed. Notice there is no procedure here. You're simply saying, given this configuration of S consisting of NP and VP is a legitimate configuration. The very way we looked at the same rule changed in the 80s. Okay, I'm kind of taking a fast forward from the 50s to the 80s to indicate what for us was a significant reconceptualization of structural relations. And I don't know, for non-linguists this may strike us fairly innocuous, but for the people who are involved in this was a huge debate. And in fact, this change required a huge battle, an extraordinary battle on the part of a large number of people. So in the I think 1980, there was a special conference on non-transformational grammars. Transformational grammar is one that changes structure. And this conception that I have outlined does not require it does require transformation in a deep sense, in the sense that I sketched transformation as a relation, but not transformation as a change. And many people came together at Stanford to articulate different versions of non-transformational ways of dealing with language structure. And that was just the beginning of a kind of rebellion kind of movement in that direction. Now, of course, graduate students are taught this conceptualization in many universities as though this is the truth, and people have forgotten how much effort it took to change their conception. So, I talked about just two dimensions, the form structure and the functional structure, two kinds of structures. That obviously led to the question, what are the other structures? Right? Yeah.
What are the consequences of these two views? Like, both seem to explain the same thing. Like, what is the difference?
Okay. The way I have described, I have not given you evidence for this one. I said it's a battle, right? Battle obviously means you have to provide evidence for this view, right? One, autobiographically speaking, one piece of evidence was in the earlier version of writing, S goes to NTDP alone, only category rules. There was no way of expressing a well-formed sentence in languages like Malayalam. You couldn't express it in terms of category structure alone. This is what I proved in one of the articles that I wrote at that time, in late 70s. The demonstration that it is impossible to describe grammaticality using this. But if you use this, if you use, this kind of stuff, it was so easy. So I used phenomena, or whatever, the relations like passive, active, causative, reflexive relation. That is to say, things like John pinched himself. Himself is a reflexive. Combination of those things, and I showed that unless you used functional categories like this, there was no way you can say anything about the regularities in languages like Malayalam, or coming to that, in Indian languages in general. And this was also demonstrated in languages like Japanese, Korean, and so on. A huge bunch of languages require this kind of structure. How do I give you a flavor of that stuff? Okay. Let me try this one. Suppose I say Putti, Ame, beautiful bacche, This means the child pinched the mother in self's house. English doesn't have this kind of expression, self's, because himself cannot be a possessive. In Hindi, it translates as apna. In Tamil, I think it is tande, tan, something like that. But Tamil has some complication. There are some verb forms which create. So I will not use Tamil this because that requires an extra word. Whose house is it? It has to be this, not this. So the rule here is that this expression, swa, or the corresponding the other expression, tan or tande, can refer only to the subject. It is not stateable in terms of relative word order or case or anything like that. That's, I mean, I can argue that, but I'm not going to do that.
But wouldn't this be equivalent to, let's say, Kumar took Varma to his house?
Kumar took Varma to his house can mean either Kumar or Varma.
Yeah.
But here,
But
this can mean only the subjects. So if I use a pronoun, avante, so this is a male pronoun, so you cannot say a male. Suppose you say Achan you can't because you don't use this pronoun to refer to elders. So, so Utti, Billine. Bill is his friend. So let's say Ram. Ram Billine, Sundar Mitvichuli. This, if you say Avande, it can be Ram's house or Bill's house. Both are possible. But the moment you use the other guy, Tan and Swa, it can only refer to the subject. And how do you say subject? You can't refer to word order, you cannot refer to case, nothing. So subject is has to be represented separately from word order and case and so on. If you apply passive, okay, so if you say, this is not a normal way of saying it, but it is possible. Ramanal, Bill, Sontam, Beetle Lecture, Nullapettu. Ram was pinched by Bill. No, not Ram was pinched, I'm sorry. Bill was pinched by Ram in self's house. This is the self. This self now refers to Bill. It refers to the victim, not the agent. But that is because the subject here is this, the subject here is this. So I told you that the rule of passive changed object to subject. So exactly as you expect, this changes. And there are many other phenomena of that kind, not simply reflexive, but also things like, I'm just going to use words like control and so on, it doesn't make any sense. But phenomena of that kind will converge with this subject-object distinction. And so this was for the people who believed in this kind of stuff, this was a tremendous achievement to demonstrate these things in language after language. So there was an army of people who worked on different languages. So that is how you support your position to the earlier kind of, to change the earlier kind of linguistics to this kind of linguistics. So I just want to mention, this requires two dimensions of structure along two different dimensions, the form part and the function part. And then came the third dimension, which is the semantic structure. So it becomes a three-dimensional structure. Then came the phonological structure. And even phonology itself has many different dimensions of structure. So it became structure existing at many different dimensions and correspondence across these dimensions. That is the conception that we have now. So you can think of this, I don't know how to explain it other than saying structure existing along different dimensions and they are connected in some fashion. This will be analogous to saying that there are these multiple systems in the human body. There is a respiratory system, there is a circulatory system, and there are many other systems. And there are interactions between them. In biology, you talk about interactions in a procedural fashion. Interaction is procedural. And graph theory is used to represent interactions in biology, whereas graph theory is used in linguistics to represent structure and relations. We don't think of them as processes or procedures or anything like that. It's simply static relations. Okay, I will deal with this multidimensionality in the next class. But this is a reasonable account of the different aspects of structure. You have
so this question probably would make sense after I listen to the multidimensionality.
Yeah.
But this is something that maybe you can steer the conversation towards. If I knew the correspondence rules in two different languages,
Sure.
okay, let's, for the sake of argument, let's only look at functional and form structures.
Yeah.
If I knew these correspondence rules and I knew it in two different languages, can I now get a correspondence between these two correspondence rules and construct rules for translation?
That's absolutely right. Yeah, that is
so.
Yeah.
So then, in principle, I should be able to write a computer program with these rules and get grammatically correct sentences, which are also, conveying the same meaning.
Yeah. Except notice that in translation,
Okay, so
Right?
you know, I
Yeah.
know. So, but is that so? You said that anyway.
Yeah.
This probably makes sense after.
No, no,
next
this is
the semantics.
the question that you're asking is absolutely right. The what is common to a sentence like in English, John killed a policeman, and the Malayalam sentence, John oru policeman ne konnu. What they have in common is a semantic structure. Okay, so if we can identify, if we have a way of representing the semantic structure across languages, that's a kind of, so what you need to do is to identify the semantic structure, and at this time when I say semantic structure, I mean two dimensions of semantic structure, the grammatical semantics and also the conceptual semantics. So for example, when I say chumanna in Malayalam, this is chumanna, something else is chumanna. There is no distinction between red and orange and purple, and they're not purple. Purple? I don't know.
Magenta.
Is that red? I mean, that's definitely, in English it's not red, but in Malayalam I would say, yeah, that is red. Chumanna. What do you say in Tamil? Is that, what's the color? Yeah, but anyway, the point I'm making is that the color spectrum is chopped up differently in different languages. So that also has to be expressed in some universal language.
No, that is because you don't have the words.
Yeah.
The lexicon in one case is rich for something. It's like how Eskimos have 200 words for snow to describe different kinds of snow.
Yeah.
But for us, snow is snow.
Right.
Is
But
snow,
somehow or
right?
other you have to express it, right?
No, but then you'll have to get, you know, snow that melts at,
Yeah.
you know, blah, and has a flaky nature.
For translation, you need
and-
that,
Ah.
right? So how will you translate a sentence like Nyan Niravalakka Koduthi? Niravalakka is the special kind of lamp, and it has various. How do you translate that into English?
Sure.
It's not translatable, right?
Sure.
Or I'm sorry, I have to use Malayalam because I don't know Hindi. Echil, do you have a concept? Echilai, okay, translate that. Impossible. So you need to have you have to have a universal vocabulary, atomic vocabulary of concepts to do all this stuff for translation. The difficulty is at that level, how do you represent the semantic structure that is universal across languages, such that you can do that? Then you can say from semantic structure, you can go to functional
No,
structure.
the way you phrase it now
Yeah.
would require the translation to implicitly incorporate all the cultural baggage that has gone into, you know,
Yeah.
into creating those words.
Yeah, but what is good about it is the cultural baggage is not entirely random. There are certain atomic constructs out of which you can create these complex cultural baggages. So what are those atomic constructs of human worldviews? If we can understand that, we can create these new complexes. So the research is really about that part. And that will take maybe, I don't know, 20 years, 30 years, I have no idea. If you could get a handle on that, then we can translate. Until then, we cannot translate. Of course, there are translation devices that use the existing, the stuff that I represented in terms of functions and categories, etc. That has led to tremendous progress in translation. Much better now, because there is some aspect that is, that is common, the functions. But that is not sufficient.
So I have another question, which again may be premature. So if I were to learn a language, okay, that is somewhat different in these structural forms, correct? Is it that it would be easy for me were it to be of the same kind? You know, if the forms were similar, because there is some plasticity of the mind, right? But if it were different, then these are the likely kinds of mistakes I'm going to make.
Yeah. You can do that by understanding this, it is true. But it's not really if your actual enterprise is learning a language, right? So you want to learn, you know Tamil, you want to learn Malayalam, for example.
Okay, so yes, so if I were to construct, there wouldn't be a universal recipe for learning a particular language.
Yeah.
But it would depend on what language you already knew.
Yeah, sure.
And you can
For an
tailor
adult.
make the recipe.
For an adult, right?
For-
Not for child is easy, trivial.
Okay, so
Yeah.
no, well, that's a different problem
Yeah.
altogether.
Yeah.
For an adult,
Yeah.
where it's not, it's not the mind is not
Yeah.
moldable any longer.
Yeah. The plasticity disappears.
Right. So
Yeah.
if I knew this language,
Yeah.
then here is the recipe for learning this other language which
Yeah.
differs in form. Not form, in
Yeah.
in form or function.
Let me phrase the question slightly differently. As a linguist who knows about these things, can I help an adult language learner to learn a new language?
Sure.
Right? The answer is no. Because the kind of stuff, the knowledge that a language learner will have to acquire is almost like learning relativity theory to be able to play basketball.
No, wait a second. Is it lexical knowledge or is
No,
it
it's structural.
semantical?
Semantic structure, semantic rules, functional, all kinds of complications.
But for doing the most basic things, right? So suppose you just want to have a, for lack of a better word, just a functional knowledge.
Yeah.
You just want to go to a shop and say, how much does this red object
Yeah.
cost? And
For that you don't need the theory, linguistic theory.
No, but you see that you may want to also carry on a conversation.
Yeah.
Where you want to say, Ram was pinched by
Right.
this thing in his own house,
Yeah.
and it shouldn't come out as, you can't, you have to rule out the ambiguity, right? So
Yeah,
for that,
yeah.
it's one more level than just a functional thing, than
Yeah.
going to a shop and buying stuff.
Chomsky was asked this question in 1967.
Okay.
Exactly. Can you help language teachers to
Yeah.
teach languages better? His answer was, if language teaching is what you want to do, please don't come to us, go to traditional grammarians, they know better.
Yeah.
Because the reason is this. This kind of linguistic that I described is concerned with the kinds of things that you don't have to consciously acquire. You come with it. And you don't even realize that you are learning it. Language teachers, on the other hand, have no idea of these abstract rules.
No, but would they not be benefited with these things?
In minor ways. There are ways in which, as a linguist, I can help in few things. But for a language teacher to learn all this stuff in order to help the students, the effort that they put in is not worth the benefits. So there I can describe to you cases where I can actually help fairly quickly. So, for example, my Telugu uncle used to swear that Malayalam is a strange language because it has two verbs, tannu and koduttu. Okay, so if you give something to me, I will use tannu. If you give something to him, I will say koduttu. And he could never master these two words. And for me, it was trivial. There is a particular kind of semantic structure that appeals to this. So I could explain to him what the difference was in trivial terms. A language teacher would not be able to. But those are kind of fringe benefits, not.
Like, if I take an example, like
Yeah.
Sanskrit and Kannada,
Mm.
the structure, like, wouldn't I just need a dictionary?
No, the rules are different. No,
Knowing, like, for example,
very
all I
similar,
know-
very similar, true,
yes.
but not the same. So in Sanskrit there are this. I don't know if Kannada also has this. The structures like kartari and karmani.
The
Whatever.
cases,
Yeah.
cases, right?
Those are pretty. I don't know if Kannada has those things. And Kannada and Tamil and Telugu, unlike Malayalam, have reflexivity inside the verb, which is pretty complicated.
Yes.
Kol in Tamil, inside the verb. The kol. All I know is it is kol. I don't know how to pronounce it. Forget it. And I'd have to ask somebody who Tamil-speaking linguist to do that. Or I'll have to sort of look it up in the literature and give you the reference. Yeah. No, but the kind of stuff that we are doing is actually
Wait a
not
second.
relevant for
What-
language teaching.
But what if this is partly science fiction.
Mm.
But if I could collect all kinds of semantical usage, right,
Mm.
and I mean, Google could do this, for instance, right? And that's how Google Translate works. Essentially, they look to see where the phrase has occurred, right? But that is just a statistical thing, just to see how many times it has occurred, and then you think that is the most correct thing. But if you were to collect all your rules, right, in that manner, if you had a very large set where you were pretty sure of all the components that went in, that they were all correct, and if you could collect this and then you apply the rules, then in principle you can build a computer program that will do the translation.
That is okay. That is not the same as language teaching. This kind of work is good for computational linguistics.
I was talking of translation now.
Right.
But language, the language teaching question.
So we have applications for computational linguistics, machine language translation, speech recognition. Those things are okay. Likewise, we also have applications for language pathology in medicine. These are two areas where this kind of work is applicable. But when it comes to language teaching, no. This is kind of like saying, if you study Newtonian mechanics, will you be able to well, I'm going to talk about something that I know nothing about, spin in cricket, whatever thingy. It has to do with physics, right? But will you study physics in order to be able to be a better cricket player? Or will you just learn it from a coach? Will physics help you to be a better cricket player?
That spin and this spin are not the same.
Okay.
No, 1 second. You see that, suppose I don't want to go with this analogy, but you see that if I had a predisposition or a training in some particular kind of language, right? Then if I knew Kannada, right? But I want to learn Japanese now, and I know what the differences. Somebody tells me these are the differences. And so I have a way in which there is, I can learn Japanese.
Yeah, okay,
right?
okay.
And there is a set of rules that I follow. But suppose you as a Malayalam speaker were to use the same sets of rules, then, at some point you will get confounded.
Yeah.
Right? So you would need a very specific correspondence between, for which you would have to know.
So let me formulate the questions this way. I'm a linguist who knows this stuff. I'm also interested in language teaching. If I am a professional linguist and also a language teacher, can I help the learner learn easier? Yes. If I'm both. Because there are certain things where I can bring in my knowledge to help the learner. But for a regular language teacher, to learn the kind of linguistics that I know is not worth the effort. So if somebody happens to be both, yes, of course. But I'm not going to teach a language, right? If somebody comes to me, some friend comes to me and says, I have this problem in Japanese, there is this funny thing called, such and such case, I don't know how to do it. I'll say, yeah, I know, this is how it is, I can explain it. But I will never go and teach a language. And in fact, I'll be completely incompetent. So there might be a rare number of cases some linguists who are also able to teach a language. Linguists are not generally predisposed towards language teaching. Those are two different. It's exactly like if a cricket player happens to know Newton, maybe there are some cases here and there that he will be able to use the physics. But by and large, cricket players and physicists are not. I don't know. I'm assuming that they're not the same. Maybe not. How many physicists are also cricket players?
There will be quite a few.
Okay. But the intersection between linguistics and language teaching is even less.
But as a linguist, you can make this prediction, right? That speakers of a certain language will find it easier to pick up this language as opposed to the other language.
Not the whole of the language, some particular parts of language. Yes.
No,
So,
but if I asked you to make the prediction as a whole,
no.
me being as a Hindi speaker, won't I find it
the
easier
closer, so for example, I can say that a speaker of Malayalam will find it easier to learn Hindi than, let us say, Chinese. That I can say.
And you can make that, let's say you're given a new language
Mm.
that no one ever knew about, and you're given the structure of that language.
Yeah,
Formulation. You would
Yeah.
be able to predict
Yeah.
which one.
yeah. Actually, Japanese and Indian languages are so similar to the extent that I can even expect the Japanese structure that I haven't even seen. And vice versa.
Really?
Japanese linguists, yeah.
I thought Japanese, Finnish, and Turkish were all of one language group.
Many of these things don't follow the historical pathways.
No, I thought in terms of the rules of grammar and how things are arranged.
No, in terms of the structure, Japanese is very, very similar to Indian languages.
As opposed to Chinese.
Yeah, Chinese is like weird stuff. I mean, in fact, even for me to investigate Chinese structure, it was so painful. And my initial reaction was, this is not a language, this is some crazy stuff. Japanese, on the other hand, I know this guy, like a brother. It was easy.
And so with languages, there is always a kind of a progression. Like languages evolve with time. Is there? Can you have we been able to distinguish similarities within the progression? For example, a particular language in a particular way would evolve in a particular manner, and in a different geographical context, they would evolve. Is there? No, there's no rules
Not
as
that I
to
know of.
progression of
Yeah.
language.
Yeah, people have tried.
Okay.
Can you predict?
You should.
So is it that because our vocabulary the structural formulation that we have is not enough, and if we have a proper structural form, we might be able to, or it's just.
I don't really know, but my guess is that not many theoretical linguists go into historical linguistics. This is a matter of what is considered cool in the profession, in the field.
But language evolution mostly is to do with the size of the vocabulary, usually. No?
No, there are also changes like
No, but
Yeah.
that's because some things get obsolete and get replaced by
Yeah.
something else.
yeah. But there is no evolution as such in historical linguistics. In the sense, evolution, it requires a certain kind of directionality and a certain kind of persistence of certain things, right? Certain things are kept and other things are added, and they become more and more diverse. In language, you just have changes all over the place. So sometimes you find fixed word order languages becoming free word order and vice versa, and all kinds of things. There is no directionality of change in language change. So nobody has been able to predict that, but it could also be a function of how many people work in that area. So not many linguists actually work in historical linguistics, only a very, very small number of people. And their understanding of theoretical linguistics is pretty small. So because of various considerations of this kind, prediction is not taken seriously in that area. So it's always reconstructing the past, not necessarily predicting. Finding the general rules that govern language change has been extremely difficult, for whatever reason. Yeah. This time it is continuing to take. Good.